Well, hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. I'm James, and continuing on with our Balsa USA Stingray 120 build. So in this video, I'm going to be placing or installing two compartment hatches on the upper part of the fuselage here. So I'm going to be doing one here above the engine compartment, and I'm also going to be doing one back here above the fuel tank compartment. Now, the reason I need to do this up here on for the engine area is that I'm going to be mounting the DLE-20 inverted like this, and then obviously this is the bottom of the carburetor where the adjustment screws are here. There's two mixture adjustment screws here, and if I didn't have an opening in here or a hatch, I wouldn't be able to get to those. So I need to do that so that I can make any adjustments needed after the engine is installed. So the other area is, of course, back here like I mentioned, where the fuel tank is going to be. And the way that this is designed for the plans is that the fuel tank would just slide in through the bulkhead opening back here and be mounted inside this compartment, and you wouldn't be able to see it. I like to be able to see it when I'm in the field because, first of all, I like to be able to see it when I'm fueling it up to make sure I don't overfill the tank or have any issues with the tank, such as, you know, maybe the hose starts to leak somewhere or things like that. I want to be able to see the tank and the fittings. And the other thing that I'm going to be doing is I decided I'm going to be placing my servos for the engine, for the throttle and for the choke. I decided I'm going to put them right behind the firewall instead of back here below the wing compartment. And the reason I'm doing that is just because the way it ended up with the engine mount orientation is that the opening for the connecting rods is pretty much in the center of the firewall, as you can see here. And having a fuel tank here was going to be difficult to get the control rods to kind of go around all that. So I decided I'll just push the fuel tank back a little bit and I'll put the servos toward the front here. Okay, so like a lot of things when you're building planes and you're doing any kind of modification beyond what the plans or instructions are saying you to do, you have to kind of come up with how you want to do it. And I always think about what I want to do and how I want to approach it, and then have sort of a plan to move forward with. And usually what happens is I have to change that plan along the way. So I thought about a few ways of doing this, and this is another one of these things, you know, there's many ways to skin a cat. So I'm going to put these hatches in the way I think will work. And obviously, if you have any other suggestions or other pointers, put them in the comments, because if other people are looking at this, you may have better ideas or suggestions. So, you know, so do that. But yeah, there's going to be different ways of doing this, and I thought about a couple ways, and I'll show you how I'm going to approach it. All right, well, let me show you my idea here. And you know what? This is really fun for me. I really like building these kits. And one thing is that sometimes you have to modify, or you choose to modify something and do a little custom build. And, you know, I really find that to be an enjoyable part of doing these builds like this. So I don't look at doing anything like this as a chore. To me, it's just part of the fun. So, all right, let me give you my idea here about the hatch. So I'm going to just try to draw this out. Hopefully it'll make some sense to you. So obviously I'm going to cut out a, see if I can draw it. It makes a little bit of sense. I'm going to open it up a rectangular opening on top of my fuselage, and I'll just put it in 3D here, looking down into it. Okay, and then of course I'll have the piece that I took out. That'll be sitting over here. You get the picture? Okay, so there's going to be my hatch that came out of, you know, the top of the plane. So the thing about it is that you have to support it, because obviously you can't just cut it out and sort of, you know, it has to be supported from the bottom, and you also have to be able to connect it so that it's secure. So what I thought I would do, and I'm going to make this the front over here facing forward. So what I thought I would do is I'm going to just go ahead and put on the front side, I'm just going to put below the hatch a couple of wood sort of supports back here. I'm kind of exaggerating it. I'll put those below it, so those are going to be below. And then on the front of the hatch, I'm going to put like a tab, again exaggerating, out like that. So it will look something like in cross section, I'll have the hatch will be like this, and then right in the front of it I'll put a little tab, again I'm exaggerating it, but like that. And then what will happen is that tab, I'll put the hatch in, I'll put it in like this, and the tab will basically go right under here, and then it'll be pushed up against the top of the fuselage, okay, like that. So this would be the fuselage here, and this would be the hatch. And that'll prevent it from, so these supports here will hold it from going down, and then this little piece that I put on the hatch itself will prevent it from popping up. Now the back part will be a little different, or a lot different I should say, is I'm going to put a cross piece below it. I should probably draw this like this. Here we go. And here's the fuselage. So I'm going to put a piece below it here, and then I'm just going to put a T-nut in here. So I'll have a piece again like right over here, like so, and then I'll just put a T-nut in here like that, and then I'll put obviously a little screw in here. So the top of the hatch will have a little screw here, and then it'll just go straight down. This guy will go whoop right down into there, and hopefully that'll work. So basically what'll be is the hatch will just slide into the front, go down, and then just attach with a screw. And I think I have room to do that in both the compartments that I'm thinking about here. And then the way I'm going to do this, I'm just going to use scrap wood. I'm going to cut out the top, obviously save the piece that I cut out. That's the actual hatch. And then I have some scrap wood here and left over from everything. And this wood I'm going to use just to make these little supports, and also to make the support for the T-nut itself. I was thinking maybe I would use this piece of basswood for the T-nuts. So, and then speaking of T-nuts, I have this size here. I'm just going to use these. These are 632 and 632 T-nut and a 632 machine screw, and that's how I'm going to attach it. All right, so then when I'm at the flying field and I just need to when I need to fuel up the tank, I can just unscrew this real quick and do that, and then stick it back in. It will only take a few seconds to do that. And if I need to get to the engine, obviously the same thing there. One thing I thought about doing about the engine side, because it's going to be smaller, is actually do sort of do a monocoque hinge, where I have the front of the fuselage again like this, and then here's the hatch, and here's the back part of the fuselage, and then I have my T-nut assembly back here. But instead of putting a tab like I was mentioning to do here, I thought I could just take, when I put the monocoque on, the monocoque would just go straight over the top of this thing. Again, it's exaggerated, right? But here's the monocoque, and then this would hinge up like this, and then it would be attached with the monocoque itself. And being a smaller hatch, that may actually be okay to do it that way. But I'm going to go ahead and do it this way. But that's another option there. And then, like I said, there's probably many different ways to do this, and each way is going to be a little bit different depending on the actual configuration of the area of the plane and the type of plane you're building and all that. So obviously it's all custom, and if it works out and it's easy to use, that's the goal, right? Okay, so let me go ahead and get started on this. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start with the smaller one for the engine compartment, and it doesn't have to be too big because it's not that big of an area that I need to access. So I'm going to go back to about where the firewall is, and I'm going to just basically open up sort of something about this big in here, not too big. And let's take a look inside the firewall area, the compartment area, and that's going to be like right down in here, obviously. So I'm going to put my T-nut assembly right back here, and then my supports and my little tab that I'm going to be using will plug in somewhere like right about here. This is a little uneven in here because I had to carve this out, so hopefully once I get it cut out, it will sit in there okay. If not, I may have to do a little bit of sanding and this and that to get it to be flush when I'm all done. But that should go pretty easily. And then I'm going to do basically the same exact thing for the fuel tank compartment. And I'm basically going to open this thing up. It's going to be a little bit wider. I'm going to open up about a 2.5, maybe 2 3/4 slot or panel here on top. And just something about that big. I may push it back a little. I may push it forward a little bit. I'm not sure exactly, but I don't have to open up the entire thing. I just have to be able to, because I can still get to my fuel tank from the back here. I can install it that way. That's not a problem. I just need to be able to get inside of here once it's all in there. So actually, I'll probably take it all the way almost up to the front here, because that's where the servos are going to be, and then the fuel tank will be back here. So I'm going to start by just measuring off the area that I want to cut out, and I want to make it as clean as possible. I want it to look nice. So I'll take my time and hopefully kind of get my center line located, and then go off of that to make my measurements to make my area that I'm going to cut out. All right, so to start with, what's nice is I have the center line marked at different locations, as you remember from previous steps of the construction of the fuselage. So I'm going to go back and I can locate those, and then I'll just transfer the center line back to the top here. You can kind of see this one here that I marked previously when I was working with the engine area. And then I have the other one back here. Let me move the plane. You notice I kind of moved my work area this time. I'm kind of doing a few things, so I decided to, here in the garage, so I decided to move and do this video over here in this other table. But anyhow, you can see here that I have that center line right there. So I can just transfer that up to the top. Okay, and then once I get that center line located on the top here, I'll just measure off of that to put my 2 rectangles in for the hatches. All right, well, the two access hatches are now installed, and I wanted to point out a few things. One of them was that you notice that I started drawing the hatch up here in the front where the engine compartment was for the access of the carburetor, but I realized I don't need to open up the entire thing. I just needed to open up a little the side over here on the left side to get to those mixture screws. So I just reduced the hatch as you saw there. And then, you know, I was working with softwood. This was all balsa. I used mostly balsa and some scrap plywood. And for the balsa, you notice that I did strengthen it when I was drilling things, drilling holes and such. I would strengthen it with the thin CA. And also, I also secured the T-nuts with the thin CA also. And then I used a pin vise because it was soft and I could just kind of use my hand pressure to do it. And then one thing I wanted to point out was I picked up this little engraving set, or this kind of sanding, engraving, little kind of for like your Dremel, you know, little rototool set from Harbor Freight a couple months ago. And when I went to go countersink, thinking about how I can countersink these two screws here, I picked up this little guy out of that box. This little, I don't know what this is, a little engraver or grinder, but obviously it's a triangular sort of cone shaped, and that worked out, as you saw, really well for countersinking the screw heads. So that worked out nicely. So these are all finished now. One thing I may have to do before I do the monocoat, because the monocoat does take up some room, you know, it has some thickness to it, and this may be a little bit close fit in here. So I may have to sand these down a little bit. The hatches themselves, may have to sand them down just a little bit so there's room for the monocoat to fold over both on the fuselage side and then on the hatch itself. All right, everybody, well, that's going to be about it for this video. So the next step in this build, which is going to be the next video in this build series, I'm going to be installing the servo mounting bays for the elevator and the rudder way back here in the tail section. So join me for that. And again, you know, thanks for watching my channel. I always appreciate it, and we'll see you next time.